Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of our weekly Rashi study class with Rabbi Rebecca Schatz.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry that I was late. It was a combination of Minyan going later than normal, and I wanted to print these sheets for you. It's really lovely to be in here. When Rabbi Klickfeld asked me if I wanted to do this, I said yes, of course. And he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Why do you keep asking me?" Yes, I want to do this. So we are not going to do Chumash with Rashi, as you can see, but we are going to study Megillot. I thought that it was, because it's a finite amount of time, I thought that it was interesting to be able to kind of go with the calendar, to be able to study something that was going to mirror that which the time that I have with you and that which we will be experiencing in our holiday calendar. You'll find, I think, that it's going to be very different than looking at Rashi on the Chumash. It's just Rashi is the same, but the type of text, obviously, that we are looking at is very different, written much, much later, written in a very different time period for our people. And so there's sometimes not as much for Rashi to say, or if Rashi has something to say, it's not necessarily as in the realm of definitions as it is kind of general understanding of what's going on, potentially historical, but also just general understanding of where we are in the story of the world, and also in this particular case, Megillat Esther, though obviously we're going to look at other Megillot as well. I see that some of you brought books, which is amazing. The book that I am going to use for now is the Mikro Gedolot, which has all the Megillot in it. So if anybody's interested in getting this, you definitely don't need it. But if you're interested in getting it, this is the one that I'm going to be using. I also personally ordered a few books that should be arriving very conveniently after this class today. So by next week, I'll bring those books in as well, and you can see what those are. And I think, again, just like there are lots of different chumashim to be able to use, there are lots of different ways to be able to look at Megillat Esther and Megillat Ruth, et cetera, et cetera. For those of you on Zoom, sorry, I didn't show it to you. This is the book that I used when I was in Israel learning Megillot, and so it's just the one that I had on my shelf to be able to work off of. I am not always going to bring source sheets like I did today, but because we're starting Megillat Esther today, I wanted to kind of give us a frame of reference for where we are. I did not do this on purpose, but I was very pleased with myself that I chose a Megillah that has to do with a section of the world that is also very much in our news right now. We're going to be talking about a place that obviously in the Megillah is not called Iran, but that is where all of this is taking place. Obviously, the portions that take place in Babylonia is more so Iraq, and then obviously there's Jerusalem. But it's fascinating that we are going to be talking about a Megillah, hopefully for many more months than things are happening in the news in Iran. But it's an interesting way to be able to engage with ancient text and also modern day news and geography. So what I brought in front of you, and I'm going to pull it up on the screen here so that people on Zoom can see as well. I just want to set the stage for where we're at. So this is just basic information. This is not, I didn't give you detailed anything really. This is just the basics of what we will be, where we will be, who we will be dealing with, and where they are. And then we'll get into the actual text. But I wanted to set this stage because I think it's important to do, especially when we're reading a Megillah, which is not, again, dissimilar from the Torah. It's going to be very specific to a place in the world, and this is what we're going to be looking at. Okay, so this is the map that you have in front of you. Are there extra copies of the handout? Okay, yeah. That's what I thought. I was pretty sure I made more than enough. There you go. You're so welcome. Thanks for joining us. Okay, So, okay. So we are looking at around 486 to 465 BCE. So again, this is pretty late when we're talking about our Tanakh texts, right? This is pretty late in terms of writings. Some people say this is the latest text that we have. Some people say the most modern. It's not really modern. So this is a text that we understand to be something that is closest to, when quote modern Jews were starting to practice, like this was a text that was then being written and understood and read and used, quite frankly, in their lives. So 486 to 465 BCE, right? You don't have to worry about the other information there. We'll get to that in just a second. But the place that this is primarily taking place is a place that we call Shushan, and is in modern day Iran. So I gave you a map. I basically looked up like how they would map on, not to use the same word for different things, but where they would put Shushan on the map of where Iran is, and you can see here where it would have been. It also obviously gives you Babylonia and whatnot, and the different groups of people who were living around that area. So this just gives you a sense of, if you were to look at a modern day map of this part of the world, where Shushan would have been. So I just wanted you to see that. And for those of you who are better at maps than I am, you might even be able to literally visualize exactly where that might be in today's world. Turn to the second page here. I just want this. Did it print funny too? Did it? Okay, well, it's not too bad. It should have been all on the same page, but it somehow got moved down. Okay, so I just want you to see what I did here was I looked up the different characters that I'm not gonna go through this right now, but just so you have this out with you while we're going through the Megillah, these are the different primary characters. There's obviously other characters we're gonna happen upon in the Megillah itself, and where they were, but most of them are going to be in Shushan for the majority of the Megillah, but also when they kind of came into being in the story. We know from Torah texts and from Megillot and from Nevi'im, etc., that time is kind of a wonky thing. It becomes easier to understand in the later books, and therefore Megillat Esther is one of the places where it's a little bit easier to understand, because time becomes something in that time that is more recognizable to us in our time. However, it's not so clear sometimes. Are we going backwards? Are we going forwards? Where are we in the story? What year are we in the reign of King Ahasuerus? So obviously this is all a guess, right? No one has an actual time, but this is around these different times and around these years of King Ahasuerus's reign, these things happened. So when we're reading through, if you want to have this out, if this is interesting to you, just to have a sense of when and where, you can have this with you. And then again, we have I gave this to you for all of the different characters. So Esther and Mordechai and Haman, and then Vashti as well. When we get into Vashti's part of the story, I think you will see that the way that we understand Vashti is a little bit different than how the Megillah actually talks about Vashti. So that'll be a part of this that hopefully we sink our teeth into for a little bit longer. And then if you turn to the third page, again, this is just going to give you general understanding of where we're at. So where is Shushan in relationship to Jerusalem? Where is Shushan in relationship to Babylonia? Because those are the places that are going to be mentioned within this story. So how far away are we? How close are we? Et cetera, et cetera. The beginning of the text, which we're going to get to today, because it's the first verse of Megillat Esther, talks about India. It talks about Mehodu ve'ad Kush, right? So from India, we still call India Hodu, to this place called Kush, and it's what I did here was just to show you kind of where that is and what are the boundaries around the different places that we're going to be talking about. So there's India, right? And then there's Shushan, which we've talked about before. And then there's also places where we're going to get to that are in modern day Turkey. And then even all the way down in terms of this general region of reign that King Ahasuerus has, all the way down to the Sudan. So we're talking a very large area, right? There's not just a small little city or the country of Iran. It's a very large area to be reigning. So I just wanted to give you all this as background. This is just a packet to have some bearings as to where we are and what we're doing. But now we'll get into the text. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this that you want to make that you've noticed based off of these notes? Okay. Yeah.
It seemed like a longer time frame.
Yeah.
Than when you read it in the Megillah. When you read
right.
Day 1, Vashti is
right. Right.
Day 10, Esther is in.
Totally.
Day 12 is Haman's decrees.
For sure.
This spreads it out over one.
Right, which is part of the reason that I did this, because especially I've never sat in on actually that's not true. When I was an intern, I sat in on Rabbi Klickfeld's class, but I haven't been in a long time. And one of the things that I know about the class, which I think is fascinating, is that you go very slowly through a time period that could be very quick, right? And in our case, to your point, Rachel, we're going to actually have a much more expansive amount of time in terms of the story, and we're going to be most likely going just as slowly. So I wanted you to have a general sense of like how much time is it going to be from one part of the story to the other. And also this story, again, because it's one of the most modern texts, is written in such a way that time goes backwards and forwards. And sometimes that's hard also to understand, especially if you're reading it in a language that is not your first language. So I wanted us to have a general sense of when these things are happening so that if there's a little bit of that backwards and forwards experience, we know what's happening when. Yeah, Tova.
Basically extraneous, but I just wanted to throw in the little tidbit that the reason I discovered recently that Iran changed its name from Persia to Iran was at the urging of the German ambassador. The Germans were establishing a presence there to counter the British, and they encouraged it to emphasize their association with the Aryans. Aryan and Iran are the same root or have the same root.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. Leonard, did you want to share something?
No, I was actually just getting the microphone, but since I have the microphone
Yeah,
now.
go for it. Yeah.
You mentioned India
Yeah.
is called Hodu in Hebrew. I just
Yeah.
wanted to point out that the words Hodu and India come from the same word, from the same root.
Hodu and India come from the same.
And the word is Hindu.
Oh! I see what you're doing. It's too early for that kind of thing for me, Leonard. I was like, well, what are you saying? Those are different languages. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Hodu comes from Hindu, and
Hindu,
India
right.
also comes from India also comes from Hindu.
What language is that root?
Hindu? I don't know. Sanskrit? I don't
So that's I mean the word itself, as we'll see in just a second, is written the same way, though actually here it's written without the vav, but Hodu, meaning, gratitude or grateful, is more related to the idea of like modeh ani, right? Like to be grateful for something. It's possible that India was very grateful for something and used that word. But my guess is that more likely it's just a lovely coincidence. Yeah. Take the mic.
Hopefully we'll get to the text.
Yeah, we can just spend months on this. Yeah, exactly.
So I want to make sure I understand this. So Xerxes is a historical character, right? So extra,
correct.
Not relying on the Bible. So, and we're assuming that's who it is. And
correct.
So the timing for his reign is something that we know from external sources.
Yeah. So the way I'm just going to pull this back up. Sorry,
My
I'd taken
question
it
is,
down.
How do we, assuming that's true, how do we put the banquet in year 3 and Esther as queen in year 7? Is that from our text, or is that also from the external sources?
What do you mean? How do we put it?
How do we know that? How do we know that it was year 3 and year 7 when the decree was year 12?
Yeah. So my guess is that comes from how we're going to read it in the text. That the general understanding that this might also be a historical character does not mean that he also had a banquet at this time, and that comes from historical understanding from his existence or party planning. But what I understood from the text in terms of where this is being hypothesized to have come from in terms of which year is based off of how we're reading the text and what's happening actually in the Megillah. Right, clues. That's a really good word to use, actually. It's possible that there's some more historical context around him, and therefore these years are more accurate. I didn't find that when I did the preliminary research that I did. Yeah, Diane.
This is from the Sansino.
Yeah.
So it is now generally recognized that Achashverosh is identical with Xerxes.
Right.
The Hebrew Achashverosh is an attempt to represent the Persian Chashayarsha,
Sure. Good.
whence was derived the Greek name Xerxes, and the description which Herodotus gives of Xerxes, a vain, foolish, capricious, and hot-tempered king, agrees well with his portrayal in this book. The Achashverosh of Esther is therefore to be distinguished from his namesake in Ezra and Daniel, which is probably Cambyses, Cyrus' successor, is intended.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Do you want to say that?
I mean, sure, fine. Okay.
You had your hand raised. I assume that's what that
just there's about the dating of everything, and while right, Daniel, for example, is even later. It's not even in Hebrew, right? Some key features of the book include that some loan words like acharshta pinei and so forth, and the fact that the months are both numbered and named, which implies that at the time that this is being written, the names are being sort of introduced to the community. They're not well established, but they exist, whereas in the rest of the Bible, they're just numbered. And the names, Marduk and Ishtar being key, mythological figures from outside the, Jewish mythology.
Great. Thank you. Okay. How do we feel about going into the text?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm not going to always do this, but I'm going to pass this around because I just wasn't sure who would have what text in front of them today. So if you don't want this, you don't have to use it. I'm going to share it on my screen, and I'm going to primarily use it today just because that's what's going to be on the screen for the people who are on Zoom. This is just the Rashi from Sefaria. There's nothing fancy about what I'm sharing in the packet. But if you didn't have it in front of you, I just wanted you to be able to have it. There's one text. I don't even know if we'll get to it today, but there's one text from the Talmud that I brought based off of a comment that Rashi makes that brings us into the Talmud. We might not even get there today, so don't worry about it. Okay. Yes. Yeah, sure.
It's just
Rebecca has a technical question.
Just print.
Yeah.
The Rashi.
Yeah.
And the source on the same page in Sefaria. I was trying to do it
Oh.
last night.
Rashi had the same question. Okay. Yeah. So I am happy to answer that question. The answer is it is complicated now because Sefaria has changed. And whoever is listening to this on a podcast, if you have any connection to Sefaria, change it back. But there's the way that you do it is that on Sefaria, you click on the verse and then you press add to sheet. And then there's a place that says commentary and you can do the same thing. And so then it goes onto the same sheet. I can show you how to do it sometime. Correct. Yeah. Which that's totally fine. It's just now Safaria has changed the way to find those sheets, which is very, very complicated. So, anyway, okay. Let's do it. Okay. I will not read everything in trope, though I do think that the trope of Megillat Esther is quite beautiful. But it's hard to, first, I'm sure many of us in this room, it's hard to read these words without the trope associated to it. But we'll start without trope. Okay. ויהי בימי אחשוורוש, הוא אחשוורוש, המלך מהודו ועד כוש, 27 ומאה מדינה. Okay, so first of all, what's the primary question here? If you read just this first verse, right, that in the days of Ahasuerus, this was Ahasuerus, the king who reigned from Hodu ad Kush, and we just talked about where that might be. And he reigned over 127 provinces, which is, as we just described when I told you about the map a little bit, it's a very, very large piece of land, but also that's a lot of places to be reigning, especially back in this day. So what are some primary questions that you might have about this text? Marshall.
Is it that it has to say to identify Achashverosh? Were there other Achashverosh around, changing the time frame?
Yeah, great. So the first question is, and Rashi tends to ask this question in just a second, so we'll look at it. But if it says B'yamei Achashverosh, right, in the time of Achashverosh, why do you have to say this is Achashverosh, right? What's the point in reiterating that this is Achashverosh? Does it either change the time or to add to Marshall's question, were there many people being named Achashverosh? And so now we're claiming, no, this is the Achashverosh that we're specifically talking about. Okay, let's just go around the room. So Rick, Joel, and then Rick, and then Paul, and then everybody else who raised their hand.
My question was, when was this written?
Yeah, great. So the text itself, right? It feels like when we look at the text that it's being written like almost immediately after, or kind of like simultaneously with these things having happened. And so when was this text recorded, right? Was this a text that was recorded as like a diary entry? Was this a text that was recorded way after the fact? Okay, Rick?
Yeah, just for the silly, the kids that are going to be doing it, there's two kids, and it's going to be like a question. The first one's going to go, Vayihi, B'mei Achashverosh, and the second one's going to go, who? And then,
very good.
And then the first one's going to go, Achashverosh.
Very good. Very, very good. That's very good. I think Paul had a question too.
The question that occurs to me is, it says that he reigned over 127 provinces from India to Kush. That sounds like a very big deal.
Yeah.
And he, from what I've read of the book of Esther, he wasn't exactly paying a lot of attention to administrative details. He threw a party for 6 months and was generally a party animal. So how did that work?
Right. Yeah. Great question. Okay, Rachel, Norm, Tova, and then we'll have, go. Everyone can talk if they want to. Those are just the people that raise their hand. But do you have a question, Leonard?
No, I have a comment.
Okay. Make your comment. Yeah.
In the book of Esther, there's another king that's mentioned whose name is unpronounceable, Achashtat or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's Rashi or somebody else says that is Achashverosh. And so, but then in English, that name becomes Artaxerxes. And it turns out there are actually 3 different Artaxerxes in history. And so if that comment was Rashi's, then Rashi's saying, he's telling us which one of the 3 it is.
Sure. Which also goes back to the piece that Diane just read, right? That it seems as though this was a name that was very much used in historical time. Here we believe that it's the first. And then to your point, it seems like there were many others and potentially even in our own text. Yeah, great. Okay.
I'll just say that it's,
See,
since you
we're gonna-
said it was Cersei
Yeah, go.
the first,
Yeah.
obviously there were later ones.
Correct. So it's possible that we are just making sure that we know that this is exactly who it is. Okay, Barry.
So some searching shows this particular Ahasuerus, he didn't gain his reign by inheritance. He gained it by financial and political maneuvering. And so he wasn't really secure in that position, which therefore colors the way in which he did maintain his position.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna pause just because at some point we should get to a Rashi today. So I'm gonna pause and respond because Rashi says exactly the same thing that Barry just shared. So Rashi says if you're on the sheet that I gave you, it's the third Rashi on here, and if you're not, it's just on the Rashi that's on Hamolech. And so he says Shemalach me'atzmo velo haya mizera hamlucha, meaning he reigned this came to him on his own, right? He received this not because the father before him was a king. He reigned on his own, and he was not someone who was given this because there was royalty in his blood beforehand. So you could see that you could read this in two different ways. You could be the optimist and say, wow, he must have been really impressive as a king, right, as royalty, and therefore given the charge to do this, which, to Paul's point, that seems to be contradictory to the guy that we know from the rest of the story. However, it could also mean, to Barry's point, maybe there was some concern over, could he really do this? Was this really the guy who was going to be able to do it? Because if there wasn't any DNA to make him royalty, did he really know what he was doing? Was he going to be able to reign, especially all of these places, with great success, right? Which is a big question. And Rashi seems to want us to really understand that his reigning came from him, from his maybe skills, but definitely came from him and not just because he was born into a royal family. Okay, Tova, did you have something to say?
Only the kind of literary comment that my immediate thought was, well, the translation is "it happened in the days." So my thought was, what happened? So
great.
I mean, we're given all this detail, but what's hanging there is, and why is this going? What is it that actually happened that we're going to hear?
Great, and the second verse is going to answer that. It's going to by starting with Bayamim Hahem.
All right. To Paul's point, certainly the sort of buffoon image is one very valid interpretation of the story, but there is a read known from like Abarbanel and the Malbim that's very political, where it sees these, parties as sort of like the Soviet Union trying to intimidate the provinces of like, see how much wealth and power we have, you're not going to rebel. And then afterwards, there's like a smaller party for the capital cities, so there's not like a revolt there. Another approach.
Since everybody has to speak.
I was literally just going to say, not everybody has to speak, but if you would like to, you're welcome to. Yeah.
I find it interesting. We're all trying to relate this to history.
Right.
I would love to sit around a table and hear you guys analyze the West Wing, trying to figure out who the president was and who that was, etc. And if you want to connect it to history, then come to the Purim spiel, come to the Purim Suda, and then you'll connect that spiel to some history, I'm sure. But more seriously, to me, it's obvious. This is a story. So in the days of King Shmulik, that was the King Shmulik who actually was ruling from this to that, to this to that, and it's setting the stage. So what's going to happen is this is the whole story. All these chapters are this whole story. And for those who want to actually take it out of the context of the story and relate it to history, good luck. But for the rest of us, we want to understand this story as by itself.
So in that same vein, so if you think about it as a story, you think about our founding fathers' stories, some of which were true and some of which weren't.
Sure.
We all learned, George Washington chopped down the cherry tree and whatever. And maybe we should be reading it in that way.
Yeah, and when we're not gonna, I mean, at this at this speed, we're barely going to get through Megillat Esther. But if we had time to get through all the different Megillot, we would see something very similar. That when we read, and people always say, "Oh, are we supposed to read Megillat Esther as if it's satire? Or are we supposed to read it as if it's history? Or are we supposed to read it as if it's something to really pay attention to?" Because just like in modern day, right? Should we be aware of what's going on to our people and who's standing up and who's not? That was a spoiler alert for what's going to happen in Megillat Esther. But in general, right, the different Megillot should be seen as, okay, we have the Torah and we can read the Torah in any which way we want. We can read it as a historical piece of narrative. We can read it as a story, as a bunch of different narrative that, whether true or not, helps us understand morals and values. Or we can just read it like we would read nursery rhymes, right? As a way of understanding that there are things for us to know that may or may not have happened, but they were entertaining and they were good for us to understand as people, as how we can live our lives. The Megillot tend to have much more rooted messaging for us to understand. And if I said to you, what's the purpose of Megillat Ruth, for example, you would probably all have a version of the same answer, right? It's very clear to us what the understanding should be from that Megillah. And so I think to your point, should we be reading this Megillah less as just like a fantastical story that happens on a holiday where we all dress up and drink too much? And should we actually read it as something to really pay attention to and understand as a founding part of where we come from and how we can continue to exist? Okay, to the Reuben Greens, the Green and then Reuben Green.
I'm happy to go by either name.
Okay, great.
We're told this comes after the wonderful, great King Cyrus, who was a Philo-Semite.
Mm-hmm.
He allowed Jews to return to Eretz Yisrael. And this, to me, is a strong parallel to the Torah story, because Ahasuerus, just as we read about, there came to be a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph.
Right.
So also Ahasuerus comes,
right,
and he has no biological or historical strong connection to Cyrus.
Right.
Yes, he ruled over 127 provinces, but we don't know how many provinces there were shortly before him or how he came to power. It may have been a very violent coming to power.
Sure.
There may have been 150 provinces before, or maybe he expanded it from 115 to 127.
Sure.
We don't know. What we do know is he doesn't have a connection to the past.
Right.
And he's definitely not Philo-Semitic.
Right, which I won't repeat what I just said, but it's a really interesting way to understand this as a story that we can learn from, as a way to understand our people and how to protect our people, right? Yeah, Rachel.
I've been thinking of the geography from India to Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big area. And if you're the regional bureaucrat in Egypt on your way to Sudan, and you get a message that there's a big party in Shushan and you better get there, it kind of gives a context to why the party lasted 6 months. Because how long? Let's assume that the transportation was camel caravans. How long would it take you to get from one part of the kingdom to another?
Right.
And Shushan is not the center. It's kind of to the east.
Right. And it's a really important point in terms of the timeline too, right? And that's part of the reason I gave you the timeline, because I forget who said it, but there's you could read this story as if this thing happened, then this thing happened, then this thing happened, and it could feel like it was very quick. But that's why I wanted you to see what the time breakdown was, and to see where the locations were, because there's just no chance that anything could have been bing, bam, boom, because you were getting on trains and planes and things were not close. So before we take one more round of questions, let's just look at a few Rashis, and then we can get to the second verse and see what other people have to say. Okay, so this first Rashi on here, and again, this would be in your book if you have a Rashi. I'm just going to read it off of the source that I'm sharing with the people on Zoom. Vayhi b'yimei Achashverosh is the Dibur HaMatchil, is what Rashi's talking about. And it says, Melech Paras Haya. So he was the king of Persia. So Rashi's just explaining to us who this guy was. And then it says, Shemalach Tacha Koresh Lesof Shvi'im Shana Shel Galut Bavel. And then he continued to reign in place of Koresh at the end of 70 years of at the end of the 70 years, of the Babylonian exile. So Rashi is giving us Rashi's timeline, right? He's explaining to us what it means that this was in the time of Achashverosh. The time to Rashi means this particular reign and time period. And then he's giving us the context of the Babylonian exile so that we can kind of orient ourselves as to when and for how long around that particular piece of history that we know very well. Then Rashi's going to explain to us, why does it say Hu Achashverosh? Because again, to many of your comments, it says that this was in the time of Achashverosh. Why does it have to also say that it's Achashverosh? We should know that, given the first few words, So then Rashi says, Hu berisho mitchilato ve'ad sofo. So for those of you who know Hebrew, it's actually written much nicer in English than it's written in Hebrew. But what it basically means is that he was an evil guy from the beginning until the end, right? So I don't know where the equally wicked came from in this translation, but what we're understanding here is that the reason that the Megillah might say Hu Achashverosh is not just to say that this was a guy named Achashverosh, but he was the same evil guy from the beginning of his reign till the time that he stopped. So it's not so much, his name was Stevie Green, right? It's not telling us, it's not trying to get at the, it's not trying to get at the fact that we need to know his name again. Rashi's trying to say, you also need to know his character. He was the same guy. Now, had he been a really nice guy, I think Rashi would have said the same thing, right? He's not trying to get us to understand that he is trying to get us to understand that he was an evil guy, but that the point of it is not to say he was evil at this particular moment. The point is to say that his character stayed the same. Now, there are pros and cons to that, right? The pro is you knew what you were getting at any moment of his reign. The con to that is seemingly there was no growth for this guy, right? He just was the same evil, royal human for the entirety of his reign. So that seems to be Rashi's explanation around why does it say. Yeah, Joel. That is a great question. No. I don't think that's the case. Achashverosh, but isn't spelled with an ayin, right? So, that's a lovely drash, but I don't think that's where he's getting it from. My guess is that a lot of our commentators do this. He's read the whole story, so he's just giving us kind of the general sense of what he knows of Achashverosh. It does say here that the proof text for it is from Megillat Yud Aleph Aleph, so it's possible that it says something more about that there. I didn't look into it, but I think that the general understanding here from Rashi is that's the guy that we've known throughout the whole Megillah, so we're just going to tell you that he stays the same. Before I get one more comment, let me just finish this last Rashi, and then I won't feel like we didn't get through the first verse. Okay, so this last Rashi that he has here on this particular verse is now going to talk about these the area, right? And I just want you to recognize that a lot of the geographical areas that Rashi is going to point out are not the geographical areas that, or are not all of the geographical areas that I pointed out to you based on kind of modern understanding of the map. So I just want to point out that there's going to be a little bit of a discrepancy there. But again, Rashi didn't live in our day. And so what he understood of the what's the word I'm looking for? Boundaries, yeah, the geography, but the general boundaries of his reign might have just been different at that time. Okay, so the Dibur Matchil is Mehodu ve'ad Kush, from India until Kush. Hamalech ha-me'ah ve'esrim ve'sheva medinot, kmo shemalach mehodu ve'ad Kush, she'amdim ze etzel ze. So we know this already, that he reigned over 127 provinces, and he reigned from Hodu to Kush, and these are situated next to one another. And then it goes on to say, V'chen ki hu rodeh bechol ever hanahar, mitipsach ve'ad Aza. So we're getting that it's explained to us that this area here is the entire area beyond the Euphrates, from Tipsach, which I don't know where that is, to Gaza. Right, which that's an area that I think we all know pretty well. So from wherever the Euphrates River is in relationship to Gaza, that it was that area, meaning that the ruling of Achashverosh was on the side of the river, and then also on that other side between the Euphrates and Gaza. So again, there's a very different geographical understanding here by Rashi than there is for the modern understanding that goes much further, right? From that, we're understanding that Kush would be much further down in Sudan. Gaza is not as far as Sudan, as we all know. Yeah, Barry. Here, you can use this one.
So a coincidence, that's yours.
Okay, I'll keep it. I'm happy to share. That's true. That's true.
There's a coincidence in the number 127 provinces. Sarah lived 127 years. And there's a connection between, one can posit that there's a connection between Esther being her lineage to Sarah and the 127. Another is that the Koresh is likened to Cyrus, who allowed the building of the temple, and that Ahasuerus stopped it. And that's, from Rashi, that's the beginning of the wickedness.
Interesting. Yeah, Norm.
I looked up Tifsach.
Oh, thank you.
It's on a major ford of the Euphrates River.
Ah, okay.
It was the northern boundary of Solomon's kingdom at its greatest expansion. And a later king, Menachem, also besieged and brutally destroyed it because they wouldn't submit to his rule. And it's considered a major ford of the Euphrates. That's where Cyrus crossed the Euphrates and Darius crossed the Euphrates. So it was a big place there, and Gaza is Gaza, which we all know.
Right. Yes, Stevie. Oh, Leonard, and then Stevie.
I looked up here the Achaemenid dynasty. That's the one that includes people like Cyrus and Darius and Xerxes and so on. And there's actually 3 kings in between Cyrus and Xerxes. And according to this, they all seem to be related to each other, despite what Rashi says.
Okay. Is Egypt related to Xerxes or just to Cyrus?
Well, historically, he might have been.
Cambyses is the son of Cyrus, whose brother is Bardia. And then we have Darius the Great. It doesn't say what the relationship is there. And then the son of Darius is Xerxes.
I wouldn't trust Rashi for genealogy or geography particularly because he lived in Europe. But yeah, I was gonna say is Rashi had the opportunity to invoke some midrashim about the number 127. Both Sarah and also the Talmud gives. There's someone else is described as ruling over 120 provinces. I don't remember exactly who, but the Talmud then says like, oh, so Cyrus had those, and also the 7 Palestinian nations that Israel conquers allegedly. So like that's what they're adding is like Israel.
Very quickly, Rashi is not making this up. The phrase Tifsach de Gaza is in Malachim Aleph. So he's just extracting that phrase.
Does it not say that here? I don't know. Yes, it is from Malach. Sorry, it says it in my book. It does. Maybe it doesn't say it here. Sorry, it doesn't say it on the source sheet. So Safari didn't add it. But yes, it's from Malachim Aleph. It's from First Kings. So to Larry's point, this is not just, he didn't just decide that this was a nice sentence that he was going to add. It is from a historical. Well, it's from another source. Did you want to say something, Rick?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this is right, but the word molech.
Yeah.
Like we don't have that with Pharaoh. I don't think that form of ruling is there. So maybe just being fanciful and silly on the third one down, maybe Rashi is concentrating on the form molech with the o. He's got risha, rish o and meet chilato and vad sofo. So maybe he's riffing. Maybe he's riffing off of that.
Very nice. Yeah, Joel.
Is it possible that Rashi is reading Hamolech as close to Malach? That's why he got the evilness from?
Oh, interesting. Yes, it is very possible. Yeah. By the way, I just think that this class, like the recordings from this class, I think should just be the next version of the Talmud, because this is, I think I've said 10 words and I'm very happy to just have you all teach me. It's really fascinating to have all of your insights. So thank you for being so attentive and sharing them. Okay. I do want to get to the second verse, if that's okay with everybody. On the same day, I know. I only have 6 months with you people, so I gotta go a little bit faster. Okay. Okay. So we might not get through all the Rashis. I understand that, but I want to just at least get to the second verse. Okay. Bayamim hahem keshevet hamelech Achashverosh al kiseh malchuto asher b'Shushan habira. So again, was it you, Barry, who said, or was it Tova? It was one of the two of you who said, like, so what are these days, right? It's Tova. So we're not really getting an answer, but we are understanding that when it says in the first verse, Vayihi b'yamei Achashverosh, the answer to b'yamei Achashverosh is that we're saying that those were the days when King Achashverosh ruled. So again, seems kind of self-explanatory if you're going to say b'yamei Achashverosh. But they want us to understand that these are the days when Achashverosh was ruling. And it very specifically says, Al kiseh malchuto. Right? So as we all know about royalty in our day or in anybody's day, just because you are royal does not mean that you are sitting in a throne that gives you any kind of leadership, right? So there are lots of princes and princesses and lords and what have you, who are not the king and queen, right? So they are not the ones who have the primary, let's call it leadership, over what's happening in their system. But here it's very clearly saying al kiseh malchuto, which I think is trying to get us to understand he was in charge. For all of that time, he was in charge, and this was in Shushan Habira, in the kingdom of Shushan. Interesting that it says fortress, but in the kingdom there. Rebecca.
Yeah. Reading the two psukim one after the other.
Yeah.
I interpret it as the first pasuk is saying he's conquered 100, or he somehow got 127 nations or provinces. And when he's done with his conquering, he comes back. And now this is happening after he's concluded that part of his reign and he's sitting quietly, back in his capital.
Yeah, it's a lovely way of reading it, especially to see them back to back. That would be a nice way of understanding the differences. Does someone else have a hand up? Yeah, Tova. Here, you can use mine. I can grab it from you. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay.
I have one to declare, because I was going by the translation I had of Bishushan Habira as the fortress of Shushan,
right?
But what is the actual derivation of Habira? It can't be translated that way, in your opinion?
So Birat, the idea of Bira, it can mean beer, which is the joke that Rick is making. It really means capital. At least that's the way that we use it today. Like we are talking about a capital city, you call that the Bira, right? It's funny to say it in English and in Hebrew, but that is the capital of a place. So Shoshana Bira could be the capital city. It could also just be kingdom. Like when there were capitals back in the day, it just meant like that's where the kingdom stood. So that's why I said kingdom instead of capital, because it's not like the capital of a state back in those times.
Okay.
Oh, Leonard has an answer to the question.
Yes, according to the Etymological Dictionary.
Thank you. Good. Yes. There's always somebody.
The Bira, meaning capital. Did not mean capital until modern Hebrew.
Right.
Originally, it meant castle or palace.
Correct.
And it also has a usage as meaning the temple in Jerusalem.
Yeah. Right. Of course. Yes. Which I knew this was not. But yes. That's exactly right. And that's to the point that I was making, which is there wasn't really a capital in the way that we understand capitals today. But when there was a big kingdom, that was seen as like what we see of a capital in a state. It was seen as the major place to be, right? Or to go. And so, castle, palace, whatever.
But it also, if it does have that implication of castle or place that's fortified, I mean, that's what I was reacting to, because then it presents an image of him coming back from perhaps conquest or expansion to a place where he needed to be guarded. It wasn't just, now it's all cool, I still need this protection.
Sure. I mean, every Rabbi Sean Fieldsmeyer, when she teaches Torah, she always says every translation is its own interpretation, which is why I think, and not everybody can do this, and sometimes it's even hard for me to do this, when you're not looking at the original, you know that there's some kind of interpretation and commentary getting put into your brain that you didn't ask for. So yes, a kingdom in that time was most likely fortified, right? There's no way that it was just an open area. But at the same time, it doesn't really mean fortress. It really does mean kingdom. And so I think everything that you're imagining is the case. And yet it just doesn't mean that word. Yeah, Larry.
All these other interpretations notwithstanding.
Yeah.
I think what we're given here in the first two, and we'll see in the third verse, is evidence that this whole thing was written, that this book is written by a journalist. Because it follows a journalistic description of saying who,
right,
where, when.
Yeah.
And now we're going to eventually get to the and what
right
we're getting to. And then the entire book will be the why.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely how people in today's day very much read it. As there was definitely someone who took note. This goes back to Joel's question of like, when was this written? Right. That these things happened. Potentially that person was around while they were happening, taking notes, and then it was written after the fact. We have a minute and 30 seconds left. So I just want to read the first Rashi, and then we'll get to the Megillah from the Talmud next time. So the Rashi says, Keshevet HaMelech Achashverosh, Keshenit Kayem HaMalchut Beyado. So when the kingdom was established literally in his hands, right, under his control, it says here, Ve'rabotenu perashuhu be'inyan acher b'masachet Megillah. Our rabbis are then going to explain that differently in Masechet Megillah. So I'll leave you on that cliffhanger. Don't read the Megillah. You're all going to do it. So if you read Masechet Megillah between now and next week, which I gave you, but also all of you are going to look up 17 different versions of it, just know that Rashi is sharing one piece of commentary around this and what it could mean, but the Masechet Megillah is going to completely change that understanding. And Rashi wanted to make sure that we knew that there were multiple understandings, multiple truths, multiple commentaries. Leonard.
I found an answer to my question. Darius, as it turns out, was not related by blood. He was an in-law of Cyrus.
Oh, well, there you go. So there was Rashi is at least correct that there was no blood relation, but who knows about all the other pieces. Thank you all for letting me be here, and yeah, it's my pleasure. And I will see you next week.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.